wanted to do something concrete that would spark change and bring attention to the injustices that are happening today.
We Are Proud presents a candid conversation on race relations. Now, your host, Jaron Jordan.
Hey there, friends, and thanks for being with me. I'm Jaron Jordan. What happens to a dream deferred? It's a question Harlem Renaissance writer Langston Hughes poses in his poem Harlem, published in 1951. This year we have been hit by two pandemics, a global health pandemic and a racial pandemic that some have chosen to ignore for far too long. The deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and the countless others whose names often don't make headlines have motivated a new wave to join an old cry for justice.
And we stand in solidarity with all those people, and we just letting y'all know that this shit not finna keep happening.
In the capital city, we've been here before. The death of Alton Sterling in 2016 thrust Baton Rouge into a national spotlight, deepening painful wounds for some and sparking difficult conversations for others about where our community was and where we wanted it to be.
Please, I can't breathe.
Our moral compass has to respond when we see tragedies like that happen, regardless of the color of our skin.
Now, as we find ourselves having similar conversations, what are we learning as to not repeat the past? Are you ready to see the dream of freedom and equality become reality, or does it explode? And so joining us right now are some faces and voices that you will hear throughout this program. We have Maxine Crump, the Executive Director of Dialogue on Race, Louisiana. We also have Father Joshua Johnson from Our Lady of the Holy Rosary Catholic Church in Sanoma, representing the Baton Rouge Diocese of Baton Rouge, as well as Myra Richardson, a young person advocating for change right here in the capital city. I want to thank all of you for being a part of this candid conversation on race virtually with me today. Thank you. We've got a lot to talk about and not a lot of time to do it in, and I really want to start by dismantling this idea that we live in a post-racial society, right? Despite the experiences that I think that we all live every single day that tell us otherwise, there are still people who struggle with this idea that racism is still an issue in Louisiana and right here in Baton Rouge. I had a viewer write to me on social media just a few weeks ago saying that we have a black mayor, we have a black police chief, and so the idea that racism is still an issue in the capital city is not an issue. I just want to hear not only your response to that, but how that mindset, and we'll start with Maxine, is really preventing the community from being a community that is equitable for all.
The person who wrote to you about black mayor and all of that, I would guess is someone white. And that's one of the myths of whiteness, is to have the moral elevation to be able to determine when racism has ended. If you're are white, you have white privilege, and you're protected from knowing what those who are not white are experiencing. So it is moral elevation, the belief that you get to set the standard, that you get to say when racism has ended. Not intentional, but unfortunate that we have a society that has protected whiteness to the degree that has left a kind of ignorance or lack of knowledge about racism. Because no, racism has not ended, and putting a black person in place does not end racism. In fact, putting a black person in place, the inheritance that they experience from all the history of all the past racism lands on them right then. And then they're often charged with solving it all because their blackness is supposed to do that. That's impossible. So it's not a realistic thought that even anybody who's white can say racism has ended. It is not up to those who are white to determine the end of racism, but it is up to all of us to end it because we've all inherited it.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for recognizing the work that me and many of my peers are doing. I think I'm just blessed to be a part of the movement, and I think it takes all of us collectively to make it happen. But specifically about your question, I think when people say that slavery was this far removed, it meant it wasn't. I think that people would like it to be because it's easier for them to accept some of these things or to even more so ignore them. I think that slavery has now manifested itself in a different way. I think that slavery is no longer just publicly lynching people, but it is police brutality against our people. It is seeing people in the streets being murdered in daylight. So no, I do not think that it's different, that it's not It's not slavery in the sense that we're on fields. I think it's slavery in that there are generational crises in terms of our ability to access wealth, equitable education, healthcare. I think that our people are not even just our people. I think this entire community, this is a health crisis for everyone that we should be looking at. This racism is something that affects all of us, whether you are the oppressor or the oppressed. I think that this is something that is a great American sin that we have never yet healed from, or really taken the chance to evaluate and say, how do we move forward from this? I think when we still idolize monuments that were there to entrench a lot of our communities and show them that they were not valuable or validated in our communities. So no, the answer is incorrect. Slavery is still alive. Slavery is still very much so present. And I think it manifests itself in structural racism, which is to answer your previous question. Having a Black mayor, having a Black president, our police chief is Black, having a position of power versus an entire system of oppression is completely different. Having one position for 4 years does not eradicate 400 years of oppression or 400 years of racism, of policies and systems that were meant to make it hard for her to do her job or hard for him to do his job. So I don't think any of these things are one-fit-all solutions, and that we can say just because we've gotten a little progress that we've eradicated all of these issues, because we have yet to truly face them and say, this is how we move forward, because we don't want to face them. We don't want to have these tough conversations. And that's why this broadcast right now is so important for everyone to be listening to and to take part in.
Absolutely. And Father Josh, I really want to ask you the similar question. I think that you have a pretty unique experience to this conversation, and you bring a different perspective to this conversation. Not only are you one of a few, if not the only African-American priest in the Diocese of Baton Rouge, you also are the son of a former Baton Rouge Police Department captain. So you come from a law enforcement family, and we'll talk about criminal justice here in just a bit, but also you are a faith leader in a community that is fairly religious, that community being South Louisiana in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. So my question to you is, what role does the faith community have in really bringing people toward racial reconciliation?
Well, I think the role that we should have is that should be one of our primary focuses, because Jesus Christ prayed in the Gospel of John chapter 17, and he said, Father, I desire that all may be one. He wants unity among his people. And clearly, at least in our nation's history, there has not been unity amongst all people, primarily because of the sin of racism, right? That's our country's original sin. We had slavery for hundreds of years, and then during Reconstruction, there was racial terrorism that was happening, and racial lynchings against Black people. And then for a number of years, we had Jim Crow laws that were in effect up until the 1960s, which were not that long ago. And then even after the Civil Rights Act, racism continues to be a problem, not only in our nation, but here in Baton Rouge, through practices and policies. Those practices being those unwritten rules that continue to accommodate some people, give access to some people, and deny access to others, discriminate against others, and also those policies, those written rules that continue to, again, accommodate some and deny access to others. And so it's still an issue that Jesus desires for us to address. And when people of faith respond to the desires of Jesus and do address these issues, we see change. And so I think that it is imperative that all religious leaders respond to the desires of Jesus and the gospel, and work with each other to cultivate racial reconciliation, which can only happen whenever there is repentance, when there is reformation, and when there is acts of reparation as well. They all have to go together for us to experience authentic reconciliation, which Jesus Christ desires.
We'll hear more from our panel in just a bit, but first, a global pandemic has brought the world to its feet, taking the lives of millions. In Louisiana, those most at risk, Black lives. Next, a look at health equity in the capital city when this candid conversation on race continues.
You're watching a BR Proud presentation, a candid conversation on race relations.
We're back now talking about healthcare. There have now been more than 140,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus in Louisiana since March, with nearly 4,500 deaths. Doctors say those with underlying health conditions are most likely to suffer the most severe cases and are at most risk of death. If we take a look at the Louisiana Department of Health data, 57% of Louisianians who have died from the virus had hypertension or high blood pressure. 34% had diabetes and 20% had heart disease. Long before the pandemic, these were the same leading causes of death in black people. I spoke with the hip-hop doc, Dr. Ronnie Whitfield, for more.
African Americans have the highest rates of hypertension in the world. So we've been talking about this before, the underlying health conditions that may predispose someone to untoward effects if they get infected with the virus. Well, now we have the data, and it's quite shocking. You got to think about pandemics like this virus, catastrophes like Hurricane Katrina tend to reveal the fiber of the community and show you where there may be some inadequacies. And in this community, these African American patients that are dying probably were people that were living paycheck to paycheck in some instances, less likely to have paid time off and sick leave, and were less likely to be able to work from home. And so they're putting themselves in a position where they're being exposed to the virus, and so and then they can also spread the virus as well. So these are some of the things that we're looking at, the disparities in healthcare as well, and trying to just figure this thing out. It's shocking.
You can head to our website, brproud.com, to hear more of my interview with the hip-hop doc, Dr. Ronnie Whitfield. Our BR Proud app is also where you can find a special report right now from our Care St. Cyr, who takes a deeper dive at health equity in the capital city and what Baton Rouge hospitals are doing to close the gap. Still ahead, as thousands across the area head back to school under such unusual circumstances, what's the plan to help those already fighting an uphill battle from the effects of racial disparities in education? I ask Leslie Brown, the new superintendent of East Baton Rouge Public Schools, next.
You're watching a BR Proud presentation, a candid conversation on race relations.
We're talking now about education, and equal education advocates say divides exist in public education, and those divides are deepened depending on race. According to data from the Louisiana Department of Education, in East Baton Rouge Parish, the school district is made up of 91% minority students. Of those students, 81% are black, 79% of all enrolled families are economically disadvantaged. Yet more than half of the district's budget comes from local resources. In fact, according to this year's approved general budget, 58% of revenue is expected to come from property and sales taxes, while revenue from the state makes up 39% of the overall budget. I had the chance to speak with Leslie Brown, the new superintendent of schools in East Baton Rouge Parish, about school funding and the disparity of resources for students in schools.
There may be some additional resources that we could add to specific subgroups or fragile groups of students that we could add more to help support. But in the case of textbooks and basic instructional materials, those can be taken care of by calling the principal, letting them know, and letting the executive director know to make sure that those resources are at the schools.
With our panel, Father Josh Johnson, Maxine Crump, as well as Myra Richardson, talking about education specifically here in Baton Rouge. Something else that I talked with Superintendent Leslie Brown of the East Baton Rouge Parish School System about recently was school funding, and looking at this idea that really the quality of your education comes down to where you live and if you can pay for it. So what do you make of this idea that the quality of the access of your education comes down to where you live?
That's a great question. Well, I think even with regards to education, I think before we even look at the equity, we need to look at what's being taught in our schools. Who are they learning from? What literature are our kids reading? Who's giving them the history of this country, this nation, our state, and our city? Because even if someone got a quote unquote good education, who's to say it was really that good? Because I think quite often we learn things only from one perspective. So I think that even with regards to education, we need to be looking at what are the resources that our children are being provided with. But education is necessary. Education is something that if we don't have a just system in place, then our kids are not going to have the same opportunities as other people in our society. And currently we aren't seeing that being done on a national level, but even on a local level. And so I think one of the reasons why that happens is because a lot of people don't listen.
Property tax should not be how we fund schools, because they're not going to be funded equitably as long as we have poverty and neighborhoods that have been racialized over many years. So the color of our society and where people live has been laid out by land, and then now property taxes are going to fund school. You're not going to have equitable schools until you take a look at how the race set up, and using property tax is another injustice to education.
A lot of the root causes of our issues, whether it be from racism, whether it be education, whether it be economic development or healthcare, the root cause of a lot of these things are poverty. So I think when we analyze that and we start trying to create solutions to poverty, then we will start getting better education. We will start getting better healthcare, because a lot of these issues aren't just generational. They are manufactured issues that persist in our communities. So when we start to address those issues, then we will have equality, then we will have equity. Because I think the thing above all that not only just our students, but everyone in this community deserves is opportunity. When you give a person opportunity, they can achieve. So I think once we start to prioritize giving people opportunities and access and eliminating poverty, we can start to have serious conversations about justice, serious conversations about moving this community forward.
Still ahead, we get final thoughts from our panel on where we go from here.
You're watching a BR Proud presentation, a candid conversation on race relations.
Now that these conversations are happening, what needs to happen to move the conversation forward?
Once we understand how racism is operative in the Baton Rouge area, specifically through practices, those unwritten rules and policies, and we can even look at them in swimming pools that are still segregated in our area, in fraternities on some of our college campuses. Like check out LSU. Like just begin to look at LSU right now. Are there any frats that are still having practices that don't allow Blacks to be members? Like find that out. And as you begin to learn and learn by listening to others where there are current practices in place and policies in place, written rules, like in some of our student body handbooks in some of our schools that say Black girls can't have braids, that intentionally they target Black girls and they get them suspended for having braids in their hair. Like it's in the handbook policies of some of our schools. So begin to look at these practices and policies and change them. That's, I think, when we see the practices and policies are actually transformed, then we're going to begin to see unity happen in our community. But whenever we allow them to exist, whenever we don't even ask the questions to find out where they're operative, then we're not going to see any kind of transformation happening anytime soon.
Before you get very active and start engaging in these practices, is to make yourself more knowledgeable. I think that if you look even just specifically in Baton Rouge, we have a very rich history from the Baton Rouge bus boycotts that would inspire Martin Luther King. We have just a very, very rich history of first that people just don't understand. And then I think secondly, it's engaging with our business community and our leaders of such that, again, it's economic justice about creating infrastructures, creating opportunities for our local business owners, for our families to be getting on level footing so that they too can afford the things that they need for their family, because poverty is such a prominent issue in this community. And we can't solve any of these issues without making sure everybody has the sustainable amount of income for their families. And then thirdly, I think it comes to representation. It's analyzing our boards, it's analyzing our schools, it's analyzing our companies, organizations, and our leadership structures and saying, is it representative of what this city is compositionally? Does it mirror what our community look like? Does it say that it is a progressive board filled with women, filled with people my age, filled with people of different life experiences? Because I think once you uplift diversity, you can come to more accurate solutions that better serve our community. And that needs to be the priority for every community, about not protecting power, but protecting our people.
It's best if people stop thinking of each other as racist, and that's not the biggest power. That as painful as that can be, it's not what we're talking about when we talk about racism. Personal prejudice alone does not do the most harm, but people do want to know what they can do about it. So I say it's a set of questions you can ask yourself. You can say, in the environment that I'm in, who is in this picture and who is left out? And why is that? Mm-hmm. In this environment that I'm in, what do I influence? And what can I do about the way things are here?
It's a personal responsibility that everyone has to take if we want to see the end or at least the progression of some of these issues right here in our community. Maxine Crump from the Dialogue on Race, Father Josh Johnson from Our Lady of the Holy Rosary in Santa Ma, and Myra Richardson. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate you for being a part of this candid conversation on race here in the capital city. And so 30 minutes doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of this conversation, but I hope that we've sparked at least a starting point of what should be a lifelong commitment to ensuring equity and justice for all. A popular entertainer recently said, step out of your estimate, step into your essence, and know that you're excellent. To my brothers and sisters watching across the capital area and beyond, it is time to step out of the expectations that others have set for you and into the excellence that's already flowing through your DNA. For all others, I encourage you to keep the conversations going. Advocacy is important. Acknowledgement is power. Black Lives Matter. Start there, then learn, speak up for what's right, and in the words of Montrell Jackson, who gave his life serving all people in Baton Rouge, don't let hate infect your heart. Thanks for your time, and thanks for being with me for this candid conversation on race. I'm Jaron Jordan.